So this is week 2 of Insatiable Angler. And on today's interview, we are going to be sitting down with the man, Matt Becker, one of the most consistent anglers on the FLW pro circuit. Man's made a pretty solid amount of money. Don't really need a huge introduction, but kind of a sleeper pick on the pro circuit. So, well, you were, not really anymore, right?
Well, I mean, I appreciate the kind words. I still consider myself a sleeper pick. You know, I never feel like I'm going to do well in an event and then just kind of all comes together. So as long as that keeps happening, I'm going to be happy.
All right. So we'll kind of get started here and get this kicked off. For you guys that don't know about this series, it's called Insatiable Angler. And we're looking in the backside of some of these anglers' careers, looking at I'd say the front side, if you will, and looking at how these anglers have gotten from point A to point B where they currently are in their career. And I think it's a really good opportunity to learn about some of these anglers and learn about how you can apply some of these different techniques into your fishing, whether it be club fishing or trying to step into the Toyota series now or trying to make your way into the pro circuit, some tips that can help you guys along the way. So we'll kind of get into it. So tell me about growing up. How did Matt Becker grow up? How did you get into fishing?
Well, basically, I don't ever remember not fishing. I mean, my dad had me fishing before I can even walk, before I could even remember anything. So I've always been on the water, on the boat, you know, out bass fishing. Growing up, we were in like a family-oriented club. So I got into tournament fishing at a real young age, just, you know, little club tournaments with my dad and against other juniors. There was a little junior division. So that's basically where I got my start in tournament fishing. And I just kind of slowly worked my way up from there. But I cherish those days and look back on them all the time, you know, fishing those little derbies with my dad on the weekend. And that's just what, you know, really allowed me to fall in love.
Do you remember your first bass? Your first bass catch? No? Okay. All right.
Nope.
Garrett remembered his. So it was a discussion that we had on that, if you remembered your first bass or not.
Nope. I honestly, like, I couldn't even tell you. My dad might remember. I don't know. But I mean, like I said, like, I mean, there's pictures of me like in diapers on the boat fishing. So like,
so all right. So if you don't remember your first one, what is your most memorable fish?
You know, I don't remember how old I was, but there was a time where my dad and I and one of his buddies were fishing. I would guess I was, you know, 8 to 10 years old. And we were all three of us were fishing in the boat. And somehow me and my dad managed to catch the same 5-pound largemouth. Both of our baits were in its mouth.
Oh, that's pretty
Both
sweet.
of our hook. We cast on like each side of this tree, and I don't know how it happened or what happened, but we both ended up hooking this fish in the mouth. So that just sticks out to me. Very memorable catch from my childhood.
So, do you remember your first tournament?
No.
Do you remember your first tournament?
Nope.
All right. So then we'll go in the same line of questioning. What's your most memorable tournament?
First, you know, bigger event and that kind of stuff. But as far as like my first little club tournament, no, like I was in it at such a young age that like it just felt normal to me, you know, like it was just what we did. So I don't even remember.
You fished BFLs for a little bit before you made the leap to the coasters at the time, right?
I did. Well, actually, I got my start. Let me rephrase that. My start to work my way to fish started in the Bass Nation. So, you know, we've talked about this club that I was in, and that was until I was 16. And this was a BASS Nation, the Bass Nation affiliated club. So once I was 16, I was allowed to join that. So that's when I jumped in. I actually started as a co-angler for a couple of years. And, but those were my first bigger events. You know, I got to fish with other people and, you know, start my road, the pro circuit.
Okay. What was that like? I mean, being a younger kid hopping in the back of somebody's boat. The co-angler side can be rough, man. Like It's
Oh yeah.
it's a rough track sometimes that a lot of guys don't understand until you do it. And then once you do it, you're kind of like, man, this is I feel like you either love it or you hate it.
Well, for sure. I mean, you can have some bad experiences, but most of the people are pretty good. You know, the majority of bass fishermen are going to be good people, and you're going to have a fun day out on the water. Um, Looking back on it, like those days were certainly important because like I learned things to do right and things that I should do differently. You know, you learn what's good and what's bad. And just fishing with more people is always good. You know, you see different baits, you see different techniques, you see how other people break down a body of water. So all of that's good. And as long as you're and trying to like process that information, you know, you're always learning something. So it's all good.
So let's talk about that transition that you made from like the Bass Nation stuff to the BFLs. How old were you when you made that transition?
Yeah, so I fished the Bass Nation pretty much exclusively from 16 till I was about 2016. So probably, let's see, I don't know, 8 years
Okay.
that I probably did that exclusively. Like that was my main focus. And I found myself getting stuck in this cycle where you would fish the Bass Nation all year, you make the state team, go to the regional, and then I would finish second in Pennsylvania at the regional and not move on to nationals and have to start the whole thing over. So I found myself, I made the state team like 7 years in a row, and I found myself in this same cycle, never moving on and never, you know, making the national championship or you know, with a shot to make the Bassmaster Classic or the Elite Series or any of that. So I kind of got frustrated with it the last time, and I was like, well, the BFL schedule looks good, so I'm just going to jump into that. So that was 2016, I think it was, that I've decided to fish a full BFLs. That was the Northeast Division, and I just decided to put my time into that. I still fish some other Bass Nation stuff, but I decided to put my most of my time into that BFLs and start my FLW career because, you know, and the goal was I wanted to fish for a living. So I was like, well, I'm going to start at the BFLs and see how I compete, you know, how I stand against these guys. And then if I finish in the top 40, you entry into the Costa series at the time, now Toyota series. So I was like, if I stay in the top 40 and if I make enough money to pay some of my entry fees, I'll take that step.
Whereas now it's just you can pay to go fish the coasters now, and then you're trying to earn your way to the pro circuit.
Yes, and it was the same thing at the time, but it was more of a personal pride type thing where I wanted to start at the bottom and say the top 40 and got priority entry is what they called it. You know,
Yeah.
you didn't have to actually qualify for the Toyota series, but they give you priority entry. So I just wanted to go through and more so see how I stood against those guys and didn't want to bite off more than I could chew right off the bat, but also like it just made me feel better knowing that I kind of qualified, if you will, and worked my way up.
Now, were you fishing familiar bodies of water, or was it kind of like, I mean, obviously it's regional, so you're fishing some stuff that's probably in your area, but some of the lakes, like here in Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, they all set up a little different sometimes. Obviously, you fish St. Clair or Erie, that's a different animal.
Right.
I haven't even gone down that path to even try to like discuss that to people. But when you're looking at inland lakes and stuff like that, um, were you looking at the schedule and kind of saying these kind of fit my style, or were you looking at, hey, I've never been to this lake, I want to go fish it? And is that how it kind of worked out for the BFLs?
Yeah, it was a little of both. You know, with the Bass Nation, we fished the Potomac and the Chesapeake. You know, probably once a year we do one of them just as a travel event or our championship event. So I'd been to those, and I forget the exact BFL schedule that year, but there was a few new ones. Like I think it was my first trip to Thousand Islands, and I forget the schedule, but yes, there was some new bodies of water for me, and I used that as a like a learning experience to get out and break down new bodies of water.
So for guys that haven't gotten outside of like their comfort zone, right? Like, can you explain that as far as what it's like to go fish a different body of water and break it down from scratch at the BFL level? And how have you transitioned your perspective on breaking down water since that all the way through the Costas and now into the pro circuit?
Yeah, well, when I first started, I had the mindset that you had to cover a whole body of water and like look at every single piece of cover and every single drop of water in that whole system. And I was trying to do that in the early stages of that, and I just learned in bigger places it's just not possible. You just can't get multiple days of practice and you just can't cover it all. So I've found you're better off doing a lot of research prior to the event and focusing on certain sections of the lakes or the bodies of water and spending most of your practice in there, because those fish live in those areas all the time and you just have to figure them out in those areas.
So for instance, using like some of the BFL like breakdowns or tournament breakdowns from the Costas and the pro circuit where they're talking about where they're at in the lake and the wading pattern, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Is that kind of stuff you're using?
Yep. Yep. I
Okay.
mean, it's probably different for those BFL events because some of them are on smaller lakes, but I'm sure if you dug deep enough, you could find some information and, narrow down half of the lake or eliminate a certain section. And then you can spend all your time in the other areas and just maximize it.
All right. So now let's talk about you fished the BFLs. You got priority invite, right?
Yeah,
And then you decided to make the leap to the Costas.
I did.
And what was that jump like? Like what was the level of competition like? Do you think you were ready for that jump, or how do you know you're ready for that jump?
I'm not sure you ever know that you're ready until you do it and see for yourself, but I certainly didn't know I was ready. I was just going off a leap of faith and just wanted to try it and, see how I stood. It was pretty stressful for me because, I was very tight on money. I was still working full time and trying to keep all the bills at home and everything paid up and try and fish these bigger events. It was what $4,500 in entry fees and to these regional events and practice for a week and stuff like that. So it was a big expense, and I was cutting every corner I could and saving pennies. And I even had some, unfortunate events pop up. I wrecked my lower unit, had to go buy a brand new lower unit right before the first tournament, and barely scraped together enough money to get into the first Toyota series to pay off my balance, and ended up cashing a check in it. And it gave me confidence in myself that, one, I could compete at that level, and two, like, it's no different than any other level. You just got to put the time in and still got to just go out and catch fish.
So I haven't told everybody here. We met at the Columbus Expo, but the one question I never asked you is, what were you doing for a living when you were fishing the Costas?
Yeah, so I worked at a printer and copier company.
Okay.
Was basically running their service department, fixing up, refurbishing copier machines.
So it's quite a drastic career change.
Yeah, not what you would expect for a bass fisherman.
So were you doing the whole like sleeping in your truck thing? Like what?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was sleeping in my truck, and for sure every time I could, I was sleeping in my truck or camping. I got in the Costas. I kind of had a few other guys from the area in Pennsylvania that were doing it, and we kind of all grouped up and would rent a house or whatever, and it ended up being pretty cheap, so I could have a bed for a couple nights and
shower
not
shower
break
after
bank.
practice.
Yeah, exactly. So I was definitely cutting corners any way I could.
So for the people that don't know, you've cashed a decent amount of checks in a lot of the tournaments that you've fished. What do you think has been key in that because it kind of started in the Costas, right? And then you won a Costa.
Yes.
And
That's
then,
how I got my whole start. Without that tournament, I'd probably still be working and still fishing Toyota series, honestly.
so let's talk about that, like leading up to that tournament, right?
Yeah.
For the people that don't know, Matt is a smallmouth hammer. Um, Probably one of the guys that I know of that just wrecks them. So let's talk about on the schedule when you saw that. Was that one that you were just kind of like, I feel really good about this tournament, or was it? How did you go about that prepping for that one?
Yeah. So that was the second Costa Series event I'd ever fished. And like I said, I fished the BFLs the year before and I'd gone to Thousand Islands. That was their super tournament that year. So I was kind of familiar with the water. I knew how. So going back the next year in July, like I knew what to do research wise on the map and, look for areas and stuff. And then I just had to get there and go look around and see if I could find them. But going, like I said, I cashed a check at the first event at Champlain, and it was a big confidence booster to myself. And confidence is everything in fishing. So I had that confidence boost, and then I knew how it's set up fishing. It felt just like home on Erie. I was like, if I'm ever gonna win one or do well in an event, it's gonna be this one right off the bat. Like I feel the most comfortable, the most confident in this one. So I even told that to my dad before I left for that event. I was like, I feel like if I'm ever going to win one, it'll be this one. And little did we know that I would end up winning it.
Did you venture out into Ontario, or did you stay in the river most of the time?
Yeah, I ventured out.
And what's that like? I've been up on Lake Huron, and it's hard to describe to people. Like you fish Erie, you fish Huron. Like the Great Lakes are a different animal, but I've heard Ontario is kind of like Huron. It's a whole different beast than fishing like Erie, St. Clair. What is Ontario like?
It's horrible. It's the ocean. There's just so much current. Like there's so much water coming down from Lake Ontario, funneled into the St. Lawrence River, that all that current is gathering up speed right there, and then you throw in some wind, and it just builds the waves up, and they just beat the crap out of you.
Sounds a lot like my experience on Huron. So
it's the exact same situation.
All right.
Same situation.
All right. So then you made the transition to the pro circuit. Now, yes. What did you do to change? Because obviously you didn't change cash and checks. You still stayed cash and checks. You've done really well in your career. So the question is, what did you do to prep to that, from that transition from the Costas and, having a job and doing it to like, I'm doing this full time pro circuit.
Yeah.
How do I make myself as consistent as possible? Like what was your mindset?
Well, I mean, going into it, like I qualified for and the first events on Lake Okeechobee, and I'd never even fished in Florida before. So I'm like, well, crap, I gotta go to Florida. So I, once I got my boat rigged up and stuff, I went down and spent like a week in Florida, just getting familiar with catching Florida fish, getting a little Florida fishing experience under my belt. And that was huge, just getting out and fishing. So I found myself the first year really fishing a lot of new places and going pre-practicing before the off limits at all the tournaments that I could swing, and even like going a couple days early to an event and fishing a nearby body of water just to get familiar fishing another lake. And all of that helps because you learn different things about different lakes, and every part of the country fishes a little different. So, if we go to Alabama and I go fish a neighboring lake, like I could use that piece of advantage later on. So I just used it as a learning curve.
So you made the step though to the pros. I mean, how much, I guess the question is, how much more difficult was the competition as you made the steps? Like, was it one of those things where you got to the point you're in the pro circuit and the first couple of tournaments, you're just overwhelmed? Like, how did you handle that?
I wouldn't I mean, I might have been a little starstruck in the first couple events, just looking around and seeing who I was really fishing against. But once we were on the water, like, I don't know what it is about myself, but I can like shut all that off and just focus on fishing and just not worry about any of the other stuff. So that really didn't bother me a whole lot. It was more so just knowing I had to just go out and catch fish. Like, it doesn't matter who I'm fishing against. I just got to go catch the big on this day and see where I stand. Like,
Now,
it
is
doesn't matter.
your philosophy kind of so Garrett over his career as well, and a lot of these are kind of going to segue into other anglers as well. So Garrett talks about how when he's on the water, the past couple of years, he's focused on just trying to catch fish and cut a check, not necessarily swinging for the fences to try to win one. What would you say your philosophy is looking at that?
Uh, especially starting out, like my first couple events on the tour, like, I needed to cash a check or two, or else I'm not sure I would have been able to finish the season. Like, I had zero sponsor help, and I was basically playing with the tournament winnings from the year before. So I needed to cash some checks. So I found myself definitely, I wouldn't say laying up, but I would be a little more conservative. I lock up because $10,000 is a lot of money. So,
Yeah.
and I still do that. I mean, at the end of the day, cashing a check and making money is the goal. So I need to make sure I'm consistently high in the standings and cashing checks. And I feel like when my time comes to win, everything's going to work out just fine, and it'll happen. But for now, I'm just trying to make some money.
Fair enough. Fair enough. What's as you kind of going into that as well, talking about sponsors, what's the biggest piece of advice that you can give to up and coming anglers, as far as it seems like a lot of guys are trying to get sponsors, work sponsors, trying to figure out how to get stuff as fast as possible and trying to how to figure out how to go as fast as possible. What's the advice you would give to people that are trying to grab them, trying to attract them, or trying to go after them? What would be your piece on that? Would it be wait for them to come to you, or how did you go about it?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's probably the single most asked question that I get. I mean, you look through my DMs on Instagram, my Facebook messages, or whatever right now. I mean, I bet you there's 5 or 10 people asking the same question. It's constant. So basically, my thoughts on it are, whenever you're getting started, don't even worry about any type of sponsor. Just focus on fishing and becoming a better fisherman. Like, get out there and hone your skills, fish with more people, get good at catching fish first. Then when you're ready to take the step up to, say, the BFLs or the Toyota series, you could start looking at local businesses to your area. That's going to be your best shot at getting some money and getting your entry fees paid. Jump right into the fishing industry and go after, Berkeley pure fishing, or go after favorite. You're just not going to get very far, and you're going to get discouraged, and then you're going to not want to continue doing it. So if you go around local businesses, construction companies, insurance agents, all that kind of stuff, they have a budget for marketing, and they have to get rid of it at the end of the year. So they can help you out a little bit with some entry fee money. That's going to be your best bet getting started. And then as you work your way up and have some success, it'll be a little bit of both. Some companies will reach out to you, and you can reach out to them, but they're going to start to know your name, and you're going to start to get a little more easier responses. And then you can start those conversations. But that's my thoughts on it. Hopefully I don't hurt any feelings, but don't worry about the sponsors, man. Go catch some fish. You're at fishing before you worry about that.
And delivering, right? Like, I think that's one of the biggest pieces too, is delivering to the sponsors once you actually acquire them.
Well, yes. And a big thing going around right now is a lot of companies want to offer you, this so-called 10% discount or whatever. And then you're out doing all this work for them, and you're not in return, and there's no room for improvement. So you're basically advertising for a company for a little bit of a discount. And my opinion, it's not worth your time. You should be out focusing on getting a better fisherman than doing that.
So one of the questions I have here that's kind of pre-built into my phone that I'm kind of reading off of is shallow or deep. But being as you're a smallmouth guy, I would say you probably fish offshore a lot, correct?
Yes. I mean, I pride myself to be very versatile, so I'll do whatever it takes to catch them.
If you had one way to catch them, if you're like, hey, they're shallow, they're deep, they're everywhere in between, what do you think you would kind of lean towards to go try to find them?
You know, my absolute favorite way to catch them is shallow but off the bank.
Okay.
That so like I feel like that's one of my little niche techniques or whatever you want to call it, is like shallow but off the bank. So like, say 5 foot or less, but away from the bank. That's what I like to do.
It's not a zone it's talked about very much, but I know
No,
what you're
no,
talking
no.
about.
And I was thinking about it the other day. Like, I don't even know what you would call that. That's why I just kind of come up with that, like shallow off the bank kind of thing. Cause that's just like getting off on humps or, shallow flats, but I like getting away from the bank because everybody who goes out fishing throws at the bank. So I feel like you can figure something out and have it to yourself if it's off the bank. But I like to fish shallow because you can power fish and throw different baits. So that's kind of how I got into that.
Do you think that also helps with fishing pressure, like in tournaments, when you're able to kind of not be on the bank, but be in that general vicinity of people that are on the bank? That
For
makes sense.
sure, especially in the spring, when they're spawning, that's very key.
So, what's a piece of advice you'd give to somebody coming up right now, like high school, college, looking at making the stair step? What's one piece of advice that you would give them that maybe you wish you had?
Hmm. Really, there's no shortcuts. You just have to get out and put the work in. You got to go fishing all the time. You got to get good at casting and setting the hook, tying knots. You got to get good at all that. So there's no shortcuts for any of that. So you really got to get out and put the time in. Um, Looking back on, I wish I had expanded my horizons a little sooner. Like, I wish I had gone and fished with different people sooner. I'd basically fished with my dad or my uncle till I was 15, 16 years old, and they basically threw the same 3 or 4 baits. So that's all I really saw and experienced. So looking back, I would love to, recommend and get out and expand their horizons, fish with as many people as they can, see those different techniques and how to catch fish, and it'll just help you in the long run.
Now that you've realized that, do you find yourself getting out in the water with other people more often?
For sure. For sure. And now, I've made friends from all over the country, and, some of them are the best fishermen in the world. So I will find myself for knowledge or say, hey, let's go jump in the boat together and teach me how to do this. Like, at this point, I'm not afraid to ask somebody to teach me how to do this. I feel like earlier in my fishing career, when I was younger, getting started in the tournaments, I was like a little timid or afraid to say, I don't know how to do this, or I'm not good at this. Like, can you teach me how to do this? Like, now, like, I don't care what about me. Like, I'm going to ask you, say, hey, like, I'm not the best at flipping. Why don't you come show me how to flip? Like, show me what I need to do. Because I'm a very fast learner and I'm kind of a visual learner. So if you show me what to do and what I'm doing wrong, then I'm going to pick up on that and I'm going to apply that in my fishing. So that's probably a good piece of advice for people, is don't be afraid to ask. like, hey, like, what am I doing wrong? Like, any of that kind of stuff. It's not a bad thing to ask for help.
I can't remember where I heard this piece of advice. It was about a year ago, but somebody said even asking the person that maybe won like the BFL or won the Costa or won the tournament you fished, hey, how did you fish? What did you throw? If they're willing to divulge it, right? How
Oh
did
yeah.
you fish it? What did you throw? Where did you go? And then trying to go out that next day and replicate that same pattern. If they're willing to share it, right? Because sometimes it seems like at the local level, a lot of guys are more a little bit more tight-lipped than at the
For
regional
sure.
or national level.
For sure.
So I
And
think that was
that's another thing is, even if, say you were in a community hole area in a lake and one guy was catching more fish than the other, like, don't be afraid to just flat up ask him, like, hey, like, don't be like, hey, like, what were you doing? Like, secret bait, show me this. Don't approach it that way. Just be like, hey, like, I want to know what I was doing wrong. Like, can you give me something? Like, obviously you were catching more fish than me, so like, what was I doing wrong? That's how I would approach it and be like, just kind of dig for little bits of information there and see if he can drop any clues without straight up asking for the juice.
right. And then what's a lesson you've learned along the way that isn't talked about much? Like something that's kind of like, I would say slightly maybe behind closed doors, or something that isn't really like, it's not open, it's not talked about, it's not public a lot, but it's something that you've learned across your career as you've come up.
Well, certainly the first thing that comes to my mind is, especially in these bigger, how much local fishing pressure will have an outcome or have a effect in the outcome of the event. You'll never hear it talked about. You'll never see it in the TV shows or the live coverage, but being on the water during those events, I've seen it firsthand how local boats will get out and be in the way or on the spots, and they straight up 100% affect the outcome of our events. A guy fishing for 50th place just to get a $10,000 check, or all the way up to the guy winning the tournament, that 100% affects the outcome and affects somebody getting paid or not getting paid from locals being out catching fish while we're trying to make our living. Which I'm not saying that's wrong. It's a public body of water. They're allowed to be out there. There's nothing wrong with it. But that's just the first thing that jumped to my mind. Really get talked about. And I didn't really realize how much of it goes on until I've been in it and seen it firsthand.
Yeah, I think there was some of that discussed years ago when there were some boats that followed like KVD and some other guys in the areas, and they would actually fish their fish when they left the area to go to weigh in.
Yep.
So the next day, the fish may be harder to catch or not there at all.
Yep. And once I seen that, like, it made me respect the guys that win can so much more, like KVD and Brian Thrift and Jacob Wheeler, because those guys are so dialed in and such on a different level that they understand that when they fish a spot and leave, like, it's going to get fished by locals. So they're saving stuff and not even fishing some of their best stuff until later in the event. And it just made, really opened my eyes and really made me respect them even more for what they do.
That's a good piece of information. Something that definitely isn't really talked about a whole lot, but like you said, can definitely affect a lot of different things in a tournament. It could affect a huge swing in the pay structure.
Oh yeah, yeah.
All right. So then the last question before we start this 10-question lightning round. If you lost everything you had today and had to start back over, what would be your process and steps to get back to where you are today?
Well, let's see. I would, if I lost everything.
Like you still have your same knowledge, but material,
Yeah.
you lose, like say you lose the boat deal, you go all the way back to like the BFL level or TBF or whatever. How would you work your way back up?
Yep. Well, honestly, I mean, using my knowledge I have now, and I would probably get into tournaments and start using that to save some money and work my way up to entry fees. I would probably skip the BFL level at this point, and I would just fish some team tournaments. I would, find a friend around home or whatnot and fish some team tournaments, try and bank enough money to pay my entry fees, and then go from there and try and do well enough in the Toyotas to at least win all my money back, if not make some, until I would qualify for the tour or win an event or make enough money to move up to the pro circuit again.
Now, one of the things that I've heard that really struck was another a BPT pro, Cliff Crochet, made the comment, these guys that think that you have to be dominant at the local level or regional level before you make the leap. Do you believe in that, or do you not believe in that? Because he 100% does not believe in that and says, like, it's all crap. Like, if you're setting goals, you're accomplishing them, you're kind of in that area like you talked about, top 30, top 40, cashing a check here or there, you're kind of about ready to make that step. Would you agree with him on that?
Yeah, I would agree. I would say it's more about being consistent than winning tournaments. Like, you don't need to be winning every level or every event you fish to know you're ready to move up. For sure. I really didn't win much at all other than, little team tournaments and stuff, and until I won that Toyota series or Coast. I still haven't won anything since. So you can have a successful career without winning, as long as you're consistently finishing high and say the top half of the field. Even if you have a bad tournament, you finish in the top half of the field, you're still doing something right. So as long as you're consistently doing that, I think you're ready to move up to the next level.
Yeah, I think that was something that was brought up. I don't know if you got to listen to B-Lat's podcast today. That's on the FLW site, but
no, I haven't yet.
It's a pretty good one. And he talks about how when you finish 20th, that some people that are outside of the industry that don't realize you're fishing 130, 140, 180 boats. Right. You finish 20th, like, you're like, dude, that was a pretty solid finish. And guys like, oh, keep your head up. It's like, when you're fishing 120 to 130 boats and you're finishing the top 30, you're doing pretty good.
I'll finish 30th every tournament career, and I'll be one happy man.
It's the exact same thing he said. So it's interesting to see that perspective, because outside of the industry, it's not really talked about that way a whole lot.
No.
People see 20th out of 150 boats and they think like, oh, like, you'll get them next time.
And I think that kind of resorts to like comparing it to a team sport where there's one winner and one loser in every game, whereas there's one winner and 150 losers. So it's more so being consistently towards the top and cashing checks, and that can make for a successful career.
All right, so now we're gonna go into this 10-question lightning round and kind of start to wrap up here.
Let me get a drink.
All right, go ahead. All right, so there's 10 questions. First thing that comes to mind, and we'll kind of go from there.
All right, let's hit me.
All right, so number 1, favorite lake?
Lake Erie.
Number 2, smallmouth, largemouth, or spots?
Ooh, spotted bass.
You're the second person that said that.
They're awesome. Love it.
Favorite bait?
Favorite bait? Chatterbait.
Okay. Favorite non-electronic piece of equipment on your boat?
Non-electronic piece of equipment.
Like, graphs aside.
Yeah.
Which we'll talk about that real quick at the end of the interview. But graphs aside, what's your favorite piece of equipment on your boat?
Oh. I mean, power poles are pretty nice. Does that count?
That counts. That counts.
Power poles.
All right. I would ask what's been your favorite tournament thus far in your career, but I'm pretty sure it's probably Thousand Islands.
Yeah, that changed my whole life.
All right. What tournament are you most looking forward to in 2021?
The first one, all of them, every one of them.
All right.
I'm
Is
just ready
there
to
one
fish.
that you feel? Is there one that you feel like really, really strong about that you're like you've really got it circled on the map and ready to go? Like you're starting to gear up for it.
Yeah, well, the last two certainly I like. We're starting to move up north. We're on the Potomac River and then the St. Lawrence. Those two I feel pretty confident in.
Favorite on the water snack?
Ooh, that's a lot. I eat a lot when I'm on the water, so I got quite a few snacks. But if I had to pick one, it would probably be almonds.
Almonds. All right.
Like they have a barbecue flavor almond, or just the sea salt, the smoky smokehouse, all the almonds.
What's your biggest smallmouth and largemouth?
Largemouth is 9 pounds 1 ounce.
Okay.
And smallmouth is 6 pounds 12 ounce.
All right. What lakes did you catch those on?
Lake Seminole was the largemouth, and Lake Ontario for the smallmouth.
All right. Biggest learning lesson on tour?
Biggest learning lesson. I know I have a couple, but they're not coming to mind right now. I remember like a couple times my rookie year, like I forget exactly what it was, but I remember saying like, well, I will never do that again. I learned my lesson. And I don't think I've made that mistake again since, but I'm trying to remember what exactly they were. We're going to have to pass.
All right. Spinnerbait or chatterbait?
Chatterbait.
Chatterbait. All right.
Yeah.
That's our 10. So
That's it.
That's it. That's our 10. If you think about it, the number 9 was the biggest learning lesson on tour. If you think about it, we can come back to it real quick. And
yeah, I'll think on it.
The one thing I want to hit on real quick is you've kind of taken a little bit different approach this year to your electronics. It's very similar to what Wheels took, right? Jacob Wheeler.
Yeah.
So let's walk through your boat setup this year on the graphs, and then maybe talk a little bit about why. Because I think a lot of people are looking at the electronics in these boats and they don't really understand why anglers are doing what they're doing. And I think it's good to talk about every now and then.
For sure. And I've gotten some slack on the YouTube about my setup, and it's like, man, if I want to do it, I'm going to do it. I don't really care what you think. Jeez. But I'm running 5 units on my boat. I've got 2 Lowrance at the console. That's what I use for mapping and side imaging, down imaging, sonar, all that. When I'm sitting at the console, idling around, driving around, I'm using my 2 Lowrance screens. At the front of the boat, I've got one of each. I got a Lowrance, a Humminbird, and I got a Garmin. Each of them are good at different things, and some of them are better than others at certain things. And I just wanted to maximize their efficiency and use what each one is good at. So obviously Garmin's good at live scope, forward viewing sonar. So that's what I have that for. The Humminbird excels at 360. So I have the Mega 360 on my boat. I haven't really dialed it in yet to get that figured out and see when its best use is. I know it works well in shallow water, and like I said, I really like to fish shallow offshore, so I feel like that'll be a huge help for me to just see, a little extra piece of cover here, or a little clean spot in the grass, or just any of that. I feel like that will be a really effective tool for how I like to fish. And then, of course, the I've used for years, it's got its down imaging and sonar on the trolling motor for that vertical fishing. So those are my 3 units up front, and what I plan on using them for. I may tweak it up here and there as the year goes on, or different bodies of water, but that's the initial plans.
One thing I will tell you about the 360 that's really cool about it, that I've experienced, is I've had buddies that just have Panoptics on their boat, and they're able to
Yeah.
see grass patches, certain areas on St. Clair or on Erie, stuff like that. But on the 360, being able to see hard spots in the grass and
Right.
seeing extra areas that they're not able to see and target at them, it's pretty cool to be able to actually do that. So that's one thing I've experienced on the 360 that I really like about it.
Yep, exactly. And I ran a Garmin last year, kind of under the table. Wasn't on my boat, and I didn't want to get in that situation again, because without that technology, you are at a disadvantage on certain bodies of water. So I did not want to put myself in that situation. I didn't feel good about doing that last year, but I really just had to. I could not fish at a disadvantage. So I didn't want to do that again. I left myself open this year, and just went with a bit of everything. Huge shout out to Russell Marine Products. They rigged the boat out and they nailed it. It is bad to the bone. I really don't know how they managed to fit all that stuff on the front of the boat, but they did, and it looks awesome. It's all solid, and really looking forward to getting it all dialed in.
You're in a PHX again this year, right?
Yes.
Okay. So for the people that don't know about the Phoenix boats, if you want to walk through real quick, what's the difference between the PHX and the standard 721, 921, 920 Elite? Kind of walk through.
Yeah. So Phoenix has a few different models. The PHX is going to be the widest, so that's why I go with that. It's got the widest front deck and a little bit higher gunnels, so it handles the big water a little better. You're not getting sprayed with overspray from hitting waves. So that's really the main reasons I go with the PHX. It's a little bit softer ride than all the other models. It's a little bit slower, but I sacrifice the speed for the better ride and the more room.
Does it have a deeper draft, or is it pretty similar as far as like shallow water capability?
They're pretty similar. Pretty much all the fiberglass boats are pretty similar nowadays. Maybe an inch or two here and there, but really don't notice it much.
Fair enough. That's pretty much all I got for you, man. I appreciate you sitting down. I appreciate you doing this interview. I know we've talked about trying to set up for a couple of days now, and we're able to make it happen, but really happy we're able to sit down and walk through this, and just kind of, like I said, get a little bit more insight into, who Matt Becker is and how you came up. And, maybe if you're free later on this season, maybe do like a mid-season checkup, see how everything's going. But overall, just wanted to say Thank you.
Sounds good. No, appreciate it. Honored to be on, and can't wait to see where you go with this.
We're trying here. We'll see what happens. I figure while we got the downtime before the season starts, we'll take advantage of it and do something like this and put it together and give some insight into what kind of goes through the minds of you guys. And that would be one thing I'd have to ask you real quick before we hop off here. What are you doing during the off season right now? Let everybody else know what you're doing during the off season, if you even have an off season.
Yeah, this year we really haven't had much of an off season. My I guess off season was from to mid-November. So I kind of had a maybe a month and a half, 2-month break there, where I kind of took a vacation and kind of just settled in, did some fun fishing and whatnot. But the Toyota Series Championship got pushed back till first week of December. So I just fished that, and then I sold my boat. My new boat come in and rigging that and running around, and now we're here. And 2021's coming right around the corner, and the new year, the new tour starts in February. So we don't have much time here. So I'm actually in Florida now doing a little fun fishing and breaking the boat in and stuff. And I'm going to get to head home for a couple weeks before season gets started. So not really much of an off season.
Fair enough. I appreciate it, man. I hope you have a great season, and we'll definitely keep in touch.
Thank you. Sounds good. I'll talk to you.
Hey, where can people reach you on social media? Where can they come follow you?
Oh yeah. Follow me all over the place. We got Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. They're all some variation of Matt Becker Fishing. So look me up. Appreciate you following along, and liking, subscribing, all that good stuff. So
fair enough. I'll
appreciate
attach
you.
the links to this down below so everybody can click them and kind of head over and check out the channels and follow along.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Matt. I appreciate it.
Have a good one.
Thank you too.